Chapter 5 Nine-Man Morris. Jane Gordon, looking more beautiful than he had ever seen her, met him at the door. She was smiling, but the smile changed to a look of concern as he stepped into light. "Rod," she exclaimed, "you do look ill, really ill. What have you been doing to yourself besides forgetting to eat?" Rod Caquer managed a grin. "Chasing vicious circles up blind alleys, Icicle. May I use your visiphone?" "Of course. I've some food ready for you. I'll put it on the table while you're calling. Dad's taking a nap. He said to wake him when you got here, but I'll hold off until you're fed." She hurried out to the kitchen. Caquer almost fell into the chair before the visiscreen and called the police station. The red, beefy face of Borgeson, the night lieutenant, flashed into view. "Hi, Borg," said Caquer. "Listen, about those 7 screwballs you picked up, have you—" "9," Borgeson interrupted. "We got the other 2, and I wish we hadn't. We're going nuts down here." "You mean the other 2 tried it again?" "No, suffering asteroids. They came in and gave themselves up, and we can't kick them out because there's a charge against them. But they're confessing all over the place, and do you know what they're confessing?" "I'll bite," said Caquer. "That you hired them and offered 100 credits apiece to them." "Huh?" Borgeson laughed, a little wildly. "The 2 that came in voluntarily said that, and the other 7... Mars, why did I ever become a policeman? I had a chance to study for firemen on a spacer once, and I ended up doing this." "Look, maybe I better come around and see if they make that accusation to my face." "They probably would, but it doesn't mean anything, Rod. They say you hired them this afternoon, and you were at Deems with Brager all afternoon. Rod, this moon is going nuts, and so am I. Walther Johnson has disappeared. Hasn't been seen since this morning." "What? The Regent's confidential secretary? You're kidding me, Borg." "Wish I was. You ought to be glad you're off duty. Maxon's been raising 7 brands of thunder for us to find his secretary for him. He doesn't like the Deem business either. Seems to blame us for it. Thinks it's bad enough for the department to let a man get killed once. Say, which was Deem, Rod? Got any idea?" Caquer grinned weakly. "Let's call them Deem and Redeem till we find out," he suggested. "I think they were both Deem." "But how could one man be 2? "How could one man be killed 5 ways? Countered Caquer. "Tell me that, and I'll tell you the answer to yours." "Nuts," said Borgeson, and followed it with the masterpiece of understatement. "There's something funny about that case." Caquer was laughing so hard that there were tears in his eyes when Jane Gordon came to tell him food was ready. She frowned at him, but there was concern behind the frown. Caquer followed her meekly and discovered he was ravenous. When he'd put himself outside enough food for 3 ordinary meals, he felt almost human again. His headache was still there, but it was something that throbbed dimly in the distance. Frail Professor Gordon was waiting in the living room when they went there from the kitchen.
"Rod, you look like something the cat dragged in,"
he said.
"Sit down before you fall down."
Caquer grinned. Overeating did it. Jane's a cook in a million. He sank into a chair facing Gordon. Jane Gordon had sat on the arm of her father's chair, and Caquer's eyes feasted on her. How could a girl with lips as soft and kissable as hers insist on regarding marriage only as an academic subject? How could a girl with—
"I don't see offhand how it could be a cause of his death, Rod, but Willem Dean rented out political books,"
said Gordon.
"There's no harm in my telling that, since the poor chap is dead."
Almost the same words, Caquer remembered, that Perry Peters had used in telling him the same thing. Caquer nodded. "We've searched his shop and his apartment and haven't found any, Professor," he said. "You wouldn't know, of course, what kind—" Professor Gordon smiled.
I'm afraid I would, Rod. Off the record, and I take it you haven't a recorder on our conversation, I've read quite a few of them.
You? There was frank surprise in Caquer's voice.
Never underestimate the curiosity of an educator, my boy. I fear the reading of grade X books is a more prevalent vice among the instructors in universities than among any other class. Oh, I know it's wrong to encourage the trade, but the reading of such books can't possibly harm a balanced, judicious mind.
And father certainly has a balanced, judicious mind, Rod, said Jane, a bit defiantly, only, darn him, he wouldn't let me read those books. Caquer grinned at her. The professor's use of the word grade X had reassured him. Renting grade X books was only a misdemeanor after all.
Ever read any grade X books, Rod?
The professor asked. Caquer shook his head.
Then you've probably never heard of hypnotism. Some of the circumstances in the Dean case, well, I've wondered whether hypnotism might have been used.
I'm afraid I don't even know what it is, Professor. The frail little man sighed.
That's because you've never read illicit books, Rod, said Gordon. Hypnotism is the control of one mind by another, and it reached a pretty high state of development before it was outlawed. You've never heard of the Caprellian Order or the Vargas Wheel.
Caquer shook his head.
The history of the subject is in grade X books, in several of them, said the professor. The actual methods and how a Vargas wheel is constructed would be black decks high on the roster of lawlessness. Of course, I haven't read that, but I have read the history. A man by the name of Mesmer, way back in the 18th century, was one of the first practitioners, if not the discoverer, of hypnotism. At any rate, he put it on a more or less scientific basis. By the 20th century, quite a bit had been learned about it, and it became extensively used in medicine. 100 years later, doctors were treating almost as many patients through hypnotism as through drugs and surgery. True, there were cases of its misuse, but they were relatively few. But another 100 years brought a big change. Mesmerism had developed too far for the public safety. Any criminal or selfish politician who had a smattering of the art could operate with impunity. He could fool all of the people, all of the time, and get away with it.
You mean he could really make people think anything he wanted them to? Caquer asked.
Not only that, he could make them do anything he wanted. With the use of television, one speaker could visibly and directly talk to millions of people.
But couldn't the government have regulated the art? Professor Gordon smiled thinly.
How? When legislators are human too, and as subject to hypnotism as the people under them. And then, to complicate things almost hopelessly, came the invention of the Vargas wheel. It had been known, back as far as the 19th century, that an arrangement of moving mirrors could throw anyone who watched it into a state of hypnotic submission. And thought transmission had been experimented with in the 21st century. It was in the following one that Vargas combined and perfected the two into the Vargas wheel, a sort of helmet affair, really, with a revolving wheel of specially constructed tricky mirrors on top of it.
How did it work, Professor? Asked Caquer.
The wearer of a Vargas wheel helmet had immediate and automatic control over anyone who saw him, directly or in a television screen, said Gordon. The mirrors in the small turning wheel produced instantaneous hypnosis, and the helmet, somehow, brought thoughts of its wearer to bear through the wheel and impressed upon his subjects any thoughts he wished to transmit. In fact, the helmet itself, or the wheel, could be set to produce certain fixed illusions without the necessity of the operator speaking or even concentrating on those points, or the control could be direct from his mind.
Ouch, said Caquer. A thing like that would... I can certainly see why instructions in making a Vargas wheel would be black-texted. Suffering asteroids, a man with one of those could
do almost anything, including killing a man, and make the manner of his death appear 5 different ways to 5 different observers.
Caquer whistled softly. And including playing 9-man Morris with soapbox radicals. Or they wouldn't even have to be radicals, but just ordinary orthodox citizens.
9 men? Jane Gordon demanded. What's this about 9 men, Rod? I hadn't heard about it.
But Rod was already standing up. Haven't time to explain, Icicle, he said. Tell you tomorrow, but I must get down to... Wait a minute, Professor. Is that all you know about the Vargas wheel business?
Absolutely all, my boy. It just occurred to me as a possibility. There were only 5 or 6 of them ever made, and finally the government got hold of them and destroyed them one by one. It cost millions of lives to do it. When they finally got everything cleaned up, colonization of the planets was starting, and an international council had been started with control over all governments. They decided that the whole field of hypnotism was too dangerous, and they made it a forbidden subject. It took quite a few centuries to wipe out all knowledge of it, but they succeeded. The proof is that you'd never heard of it.
But what about the beneficial aspects of it? Jane Gordon asked. Were they lost?
Of course,
said her father.
But the science of medicine had progressed so far by that time that it wasn't too much of a loss. Today, the medicos can cure by physical treatment anything that hypnotism could handle.
Caquer, who had halted at the door, now turned back. Professor, do you think it possible that someone could have rented a black textbooks from Deem and learned all those secrets? He inquired. Professor Gordon shrugged.
It's possible, he said. Deem might have handled occasional black deck books, but he knew better than try to sell or rent any to me, so I wouldn't have heard of it.
At the station, Lieutenant Caquer found Lieutenant Borgeson on the verge of apoplexy. He looked at Caquer. You, he said, and then plaintively, the world's gone nuts. Listen, Brager discovered Willem Dean, didn't he, at 10 o'clock yesterday morning, and stayed there on guard while Skidder and you and the clearance men were there? Yes, why? Asked Caquer. Borgeson's expression showed how much he was upset by developments. Nothing, not a thing, except that Brager was in the emergency hospital yesterday morning from 9 until after 11, getting a sprained ankle treated. He couldn't have been at Deem's. 7 doctors and attendants and nurses swear up and down he was in the hospital at that time. Caquer frowned. He was limping today when he helped me search Deem's shop, he said. What does Brager say? He says he was there, at Deem's, and discovered Deem's body. We just happened to find out otherwise, accidentally, if it is otherwise. Rod, I'm going nuts. To think I had a chance to be a fireman on a spacer and took this damn job. Have you learned anything new? Maybe, but first I want to ask you, Borg, about these 9 nitwits you picked up. Has anybody tried to identify... Them, interrupted Borgeson. I let them go. Caquer stared at the beefy face of the night lieutenant in utter amazement. Let them go? He repeated. You couldn't, legally. Man, they'd been charged. Without a trial, you couldn't turn them loose. Nuts, I did, and I'll take the responsibility for it. Look, Rod, they were right, weren't they? What? Sure, people ought to be waked up about what's going on over in Sector 2. Those phonies over there need taking down a peg, and we're the only ones to do it. This ought to be headquarters for Callisto, right here. Why, listen, Rod, a united Callisto could take over Ganymede. Borg, was there anything over the televis tonight? Anybody make a speech you listened to? Sure. Didn't you hear it? Our friend Skitter. Must have been while you were walking here, because all the televis turned on automatically. It was a general. And was anything specific suggested, Borg, about Sector 2 and Ganymede and that sort of thing? Sure. General meeting tomorrow morning at 10 in the square. We're all supposed to go. I'll see you there, won't I? Yeah, said Lieutenant Caquer. I'm afraid you will. I gotta go, Borg.